The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the due diligence training. We will be starting in just a moment.
Meredith, can you look at your chat?
Good morning, everyone. This is Nancy Urbanski with Minnesota Housing. I work in the FHPAP program as well as the Homework Starts with Home program. And this is the due diligence training for Homework Starts with Home. Diane is having some issues calling in, so hopefully she'll be able to connect here in just a moment. So I'm just going to take it from here. So Minnesota Housing provides access to safe, decent, and affordable housing and builds stronger communities across the state. We offer products and services to help Minnesotans buy and fix up their homes and to stabilize neighborhoods, communities, and families. It also supports the development and preservation of affordable rental housing through both financing and long-term asset management. It has pioneered a successful model for supportive housing that helps stabilize the lives of some of the most vulnerable citizens in the state. We first of all want to congratulate you on your Homework Starts with Home Award. In particular, with the events of the pandemic, we're incredibly grateful to be awarding these additional funds to help households who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And we're so appreciative of the work that you're doing to stabilize households and housing, as well as to help children in attendance and improve academic performance. We first want to do introductions, so I'll call on each of our staff here at Minnesota Housing, and then we'll call on each of our programs to introduce the people in attendance today. Meredith, do you want to start? Are you here?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone. My name is Meredith Mayrand, and I work on our grants team here at Minnesota Housing. I work with a variety of our programs, and specifically we'll be working with you on due diligence. So I look forward to getting to know those of you that I don't know and continue to work with those that I do.
And we also have Patricia with us today. Patty is our tech person who kind of helps us keep in order here and helps us when situations like today happen where we're having somebody having difficulty getting on the phone call.
Thanks, Nancy.
Diane, have you been? Yeah, welcome. Thank you for helping us today, Patty.
No problem.
Diane,
no problem.
have you been able to join us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Welcome.
Oh, very strange. I just dialed back in just to make sure that it would work.
We'll then ask Three Rivers to introduce themselves. Is anybody from Three Rivers on the conversation today?
This is Randy Callahan from Three Rivers. Can you hear me?
Hi, Randy. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you.
I'll then ask Hennepin County to introduce themselves. Is anybody from Hennepin with us today?
I don't think we have a Hennepin representative yet.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, excuse me, one moment. Anyone from Hennepin County?
Hi there, this is Brandon Crow with Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, representing the team that Hennepin County is a part of.
Hi, Brandon. Thank you for joining us.
Hello there.
I'll then ask.
Thank you.
I'll then ask Red Lake. Yeah, thank you. I'll then ask Red Lake to introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Jordan May, Executive Director of the Red Lake Homeless Shelter. I will be the only one on the call at the moment right now because I could not get someone from the Red Lake Housing Authority just because, you know, they are operating minimally at the moment right now, and it was a little hard to try and get someone from our tribal council in order to respond on behalf of the FHPAP grant, so they asked me to.
We're glad that you're here today with us, Jordan. And I do want to say we realized the turnaround for this webinar was very quick, literally just a couple work days. And initially when we had this due diligence training scheduled, we anticipated that we would be going to the board for approval a week prior, which would have put us at the 21st. And because we got pushed back a week, and because we had already widely published this due diligence training, we weren't able to reschedule it. So we understand that might be causing some hardships for people to join this phone call. We will be actually also posting this training on our website after the presentation today if folks aren't able to join. And then lastly, I'll ask Clay County to introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Dara from the Clay County HRA, and I feel for sure that Emma is also on the phone.
Hi, this is Emma Schmidt from Lakes and Prairies Community Action.
Hi, Emma. Thank you both for joining us. And I should not have said lastly because we also have some planning grant awardees that are, I think, on the phone call today. So we'll move to them. Do we have anybody from Scott County that is joining us today?
Yes, this is Molly Link with Scott County CDA.
Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Then I'll ask women's advocates to introduce themselves. Is anybody with us from women's advocates? Okay, and then lastly, is anybody from Anoka County on the phone call with us?
Hi, this is Natalie Engelman with Anoka County Social Services.
Good morning. All right, now that Diane has joined us, I guess the next slide is me. So I will just segue into the general due diligence items. So what I'm going to be describing is the general due diligence items that are required for both the planning and the program grants. And so this is kind of universal and relevant to all grantees. So attached to the award letter that you received last Friday was a due diligence checklist that lists all the items that are required to be submitted to and approved by Minnesota Housing prior to execution of the contract. And I'll just briefly review each of these items. Excuse me. Those of you that have contracted with Minnesota Housing in the past are aware of our previous requirement that 2 original contracts with wet signatures were required to be submitted to our agency, due in part to COVID-19 and the fact that I think we're all modifying how we can work where we're able, conducting business. We worked with our legal staff these last weeks, and we're very happy, and I'm sure you're very happy to know that we are now no longer requiring that contracts be sent to our agency, and we will be initiating all contracts via DocuSign. So you will no longer have to mail these in, and just want to add that all those that are authorized to sign the contract must be listed on your board resolution. Some highlights of the contract include grantee duties, which include submission of the work plan, the budget, an executed copy of the memorandum of understanding, and it also highlights reporting requirements, including HMIS, and also the disbursement schedule. So please take the time to review the entire contract and attached exhibits just to ensure accuracy and compliance. I do want to point out one thing on your contract that was sent to you, and that was essentially the final contract template with one exception, and it is in section 4B. And currently, this section covers authorized travel expenses, and it highlights the amount. Currently, it states 0, but that will be changed after you submit your budget to us and that amount, your budget has been approved. We will then insert that travel amount into the contract. So one thing I just want to stress is that just ask that you really think that travel line item and also includes mileage. Think that through really thoroughly, because once that number is in the contract, we will not be able to amend your contract to have that expense be higher. So just think that through. So we just don't want you to fall short on that budget line item. The contract must be signed by authorized staff that are listed on your board resolution. And so you'll need to submit to us the name, the title, and the email address of these individuals. And if there are multiple signers, please include the routing order, and we'll use this information when we send out the contract for routing. And once all the due diligence items have been received and approved, the authorized signers will receive the fully executed contract via DocuSign, and we will no longer be mailing a hard copy to your organization. We will also need you to submit a copy of your certificate of good standing, and this can be done one of 2 ways. You can submit a copy to our organization, or the second option is that you can go to the Minnesota Secretary of State website and submit a screenshot of the business details. If you choose the latter, please make sure that the file history section is included in the screenshot. And also you'll need to make sure that the renewal date of the certificate is after the start of the grant term. So in this case, after August 1st, 2020. Grantees, and this pertains to FHPAP only. Grantees must submit a signed original or a signed and certified board resolution from the organization's board of directors. And the resolution must also be dated. It should be specific to this grant and include the amount of the grant award. And it also, again, I just want to, I know I've stressed this a couple times, but one last time, just say that it needs to list the names of the individuals who are authorized to sign the grant contract. Grantees must also submit a certificate of liability that must be in the amount of at least 1/8 of your total grant award. And the expiration date of the policy must be after the start of the grant term, and again, after August 1st. And Minnesota Housing must be listed as a certificate holder. I want to just stress that it needs to state employee dishonesty /or crime coverage. Once in a while, we'll see a policy that lists only employee theft, and it's okay if that's included on your certificate, but if it's only employee theft, it will not be accepted. So just make sure that it includes that employee dishonesty language in it. If you are a new vendor of Minnesota Housing, or if you are if you're a current vendor and your electronic funds deposit information with your financial institution has changed, we'll need you to submit an electronic funds transfer, I'll call it EFT from now on, form to our agency. If you're a new vendor, you'll first need to register with the state of Minnesota. And so you can go to the vendor registration link that's listed on the screen, and it's also listed on the due diligence checklist that we sent you, and then register with the state. And then once the form's completed, provide Minnesota Housing with your vendor number and send a copy of your W-9 so that payments will not be delayed. Instructions on how to complete both of these forms are listed on the back of each document. If you're a current vendor and your financial institution and account number information has not changed, there's no action that's required on your part. I will now pass this off to Diane, who is going to speak to the program-specific due diligence that is required for each of the program and the planning grants.
Good morning, everyone. So the items that Nancy described are part of the general due diligence, and then we also have what we call program-specific due diligence. We have acronyms for these programs. The funding sources, Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program, we call FHPAP, and the Housing Trust Fund Program, we call HTF. So if I use those acronyms, it's just referring to those funding sources. And because we have two separate contracts, one for FHPAP funds and one for housing trust funds for the partners that are administering those funds, you'll want to pay attention to the general due diligence, of course, that Nancy described, because everyone will do those pieces. But then with the program-specific due diligence, it is dependent on which funding awards you'll be receiving. And so if you hear me say, that this is just required for FHPAP, for example, then you would just pay attention to that if you're receiving FHPAP funds in your award, but you wouldn't have to pay attention to doing that particular item if you had housing trust funds. If you're receiving a planning grant, you'll be doing largely the general due diligence that Nancy just described. And then under program specific, you're really just looking at submitting a final budget. If the budget that you've submitted to us or your process for conducting your planning grant has changed at all. And you can just let us know if that's the case and give us an updated budget, or you can submit an updated budget and then let us know that there have been some changes. And then so I'll go through and just let you know for the executed memorandum of understanding, all of the organizations will need an executed MOU. And when you submit these documents, if you're submitting for the FHPAP contract, you would submit the memorandum of understanding. And if you're submitting the HTF contract, you'll submit the same memorandum of understanding. So even though you might have one contract for FHPAP and one contract for Housing Trust Fund, you would be submitting the same items under some of these. So your memorandum of understanding would be the same for Housing Trust Fund and for FHPAP. And the program must include a memorandum of understanding that's signed by each collaborative partner that outlines the roles and responsibilities of the program. The MOU needs to include key elements such as the dates and details for the regular meetings that you'll have. You may want to detail this and say we will meet, the first Wednesday of the month of each, or the first Wednesday of each quarter, and then name the quarters like April, etc. And then you'll include the different roles of each member, such as who's going to do the HMIS data entry, which partner will make the rental payments and how that will be conducted, and who will be responsible for creating reports back to Minnesota Housing. And this MOU just really helps identify who's responsible for each part of the program, delineates when your meetings will take place, and that's really helpful, especially if you have issues that come up, so that you have a standing meeting that you can connect with each other. and just makes your process smoother when carrying out the program. The next item, which is the second item that you would need to submit, and this will apply for both FHPAP and for Housing Trust Fund, would be the work plan. Each grantee will submit a work plan that details how the program will be carried out. There are specific questions in the work plan that you'll need to complete. And when you're completing the work plan, try to describe the program from the viewpoint of a client and how they would access their program and what they would experience going through your assessment process. I think this part is important because from a layperson standpoint, we need to be able to follow how your program will provide and deliver those services. And then if you are able to send us your work plan as soon as possible prior to the July 17th date, that will be really helpful because staff in our office typically have a few changes or edits, and it's often sent back and forth a couple of times before the final approval. So that part's really important. And then the third item of due diligence is the final budget. We did not make full awards to program grants. We did make full awards to planning grants. So program grants will likely see budget changes as a result, and you'll be submitting that revised budget to us. With planning grants, you may or may not have any revisions because you were provided with a full award. And so we expect an updated budget with for the program funds with the revised number of households that will be served for each program. We did estimate the number of households that would be served for purposes of our board report. So you may want to take a look at that and let us know if your household number would change substantially from what our expectations were when we awarded funds. And if you need a copy of that board report, please let me know or let Meredith know and we can get one to you. And then for planning grants, again, just providing any additional detail for those designated expenses that you have, and then submit that back to us. And then the fourth item only applies to FHPAP and only to some FHPAP grantees. So if you're an FHPAP grantee who is outside of the metro area, you'll need to submit a county board resolution for each county in your program service area. Tribal nations are exempt from this requirement. And this will be a step that you'll want to tackle as soon as possible because some boards do not meet regularly and you may have to get on their calendar. If you have any issues with board calendar dates and it looks like it's going to fall outside of the July 17th due date, just let us know and we'll try to figure out how to work with that. Okay, so submission and deadline for the due diligence. I wanted to let you know that we're using the email again, which is mhfa.grants@state.mn.us. This is the sort of channel where you're going to email all of your documents. And we really find it helpful if you can put in the project name and then the grantee name in the subject line, because then we know when those documents are coming in, especially if they're not coming in at the same time, which project to assign that to. And you're able to submit all the documents in one email to us all at the same time, or you can submit them one by one as you complete them. Obviously, with the work plan and the budget, you may be submitting those to us prior to getting all the rest of your due diligence together. And that's because you want us to be able to look at that and have that back and forth that I described. So it is likely that you'll be making more than one submission to this email. If you receive correspondence back from us, it will likely come from this email. It's possible that Nancy or I might call you or email you with a specific question, but most of your correspondence for the due diligence portion of this award will go through that email. And all of the items can be submitted as a PDF in the general due diligence that Nancy described. But for program due diligence, you should submit in the original format. So for example, the work plan is in Microsoft Word and should stay in Word. If you submit it to us in a PDF, we can't describe the edits or do track changes. And then the budget also should stay in Excel format so that we have access to that to be able to get it back to you. So for the contract, as Nancy mentioned, we're now doing a DocuSign process. And so I'm going to let Meredith maybe describe, because I think this particular paragraph came from our last presentation, and now we've changed that format. So I'll let Meredith describe that process.
So with the DocuSign process, once all of your due diligence items have been submitted and approved, then we will initiate the DocuSign process by sending to the list of authorized signers that you have submitted to us. So all of the items will have to be approved ahead of time before we can execute the grant contract and start incurring expenses. But the initiation of signatures on the contract will be started by us once all that has happened.
Perfect. And so this last part about the contract being emailed as a PDF, that would no longer apply, correct?
That's correct. No need to send any version of the grant contract.
Okay.
We did catch that last minute, so the version people are seeing might not have that sentence on there. I'm not sure if that's been updated or not, but yeah, we just want to make sure that we clarified that. And then I just want to add one more thing before we move on to the next slide. If you've had a chance to look at the reporting timeline, and this is specific to the program grants, it may seem a little odd if you're familiar with FHPAP. The first reporting and the first disbursement will be for a 2-month period only. Normally, we do it on a quarterly basis. However, we wanted to align the timeline of reporting with our other FHPAP programs, which is regular FHPAP and also with Homework Starts with Home. This grant period's a little odd. Normally we have our grants that start either July 1st or October 1st. So our intent is to align that with the schedule going forward. So the first reporting and disbursement will be for 2 months, and then following that it will be on a quarterly basis. And then you may feel like there's a little bit of an oddity in the ongoing reporting. Normally you would be reporting on a 12-month annual narrative report, and in this case it will be 11 months. So I just wanted to clarify why that is, because it might look a little strange.
Thanks, Nancy. I really appreciate that. And I think the other thing that's really helpful is that we do have some new grantees that haven't administered Homework Starts with Home before. And so that'll give you an opportunity to look at those expenditure reports and fill them out, and just sort of an earlier opportunity. If there's any concerns or issues with how to do the report, we'll have kind of that up front rather than having to wait until later. And so that should be helpful as well. All right, so as Meredith mentioned, all items must be received prior to the execution of the grant contract. The anticipated start date being August 1st, and as she mentioned, expenses that are incurred prior to the contract start date cannot be reimbursed. So this is important. If you're unable to submit the due diligence to us before the July 17th deadline, you would not want to incur any expenses, and you, especially as of August 1st, if your contract is still not signed, you definitely don't want to incur expenses because those would not be able to be reimbursed. And then if you have any specific questions, you can direct those to Meredith. So the next thing I want to talk about is just the cohort learning community. With our first Homework Starts with Home pilot, we decided that we wanted to take an opportunity to learn about the implementation of the program. And especially when we were doing that heavy lift of the preliminary practice model, we wanted to make sure that we were able to share ideas and processes about how that part of the program was implemented. So we created a sort of cohort learning community among our grantees and our intention was to meet regularly. We really wanted to learn from each other, have a moment to just pause and reflect upon how the program was working, share resources and information, and other possibilities would include having speakers or funders or researchers as presenters. So for the first round of funding for the Homework Starts with Home pilot, we've only had a couple of meetings for the learning cohort. And part of this is that one of our staff retired in October. Her replacement is due to start in June, which really gives us that opportunity again to pull that cohort learning community together. And we feel like this would be a great opportunity for Homework Starts with Home for this program as well. One of the options might be that we could do the learning cohort together with the other group. Originally, we thought about doing meetings quarterly, but we could try them every 6 months, or if quarterly seems like something that people would be interested in, we could try that and see how that went. We're looking to see if you all as grant administrators would be willing to share challenges and successes with each other in this group, because I know that creates a little bit of vulnerability, but we've found that with our landlord risk program and with our meetings with FHPAP grant coordinators, that it really does help when we're able to share this information with each other. And that way you can sort of take the best practices that other people have done and apply them to your own program if you think they would fit. So we're just curious if you are interested in this learning cohort approach, if you would like to play a role with facilitating, how you think families or students might be able to participate in this, and then just let us know about sort of the timing on how often that should happen, and if you would like to see the learning cohort merged with the Homework Starts with Home pilot that's already gotten off the ground. So any thoughts on that from our audience? And I'll let Meredith explain.
Muted.
Yeah, so if you have comments or questions, there should be a little hand in your in the box, and you can click on that. It raises your hand, and we can go ahead and unmute you. You could also send the chat in if you prefer to chat in your question, and I can read it aloud for the group to hear as well. Okay, Natalie, go ahead. Natalie, did you have a question or a comment?
Sorry, I unmuted. I didn't unmute on the person. For those of us who are doing the planning grants with our communities, would this include the planning grant participants as well? Did you get my question?
Sorry, I think there was a technical difficulty from Diane, but yes, that would also include the planning grants. You can participate in the learning from colleagues about their experiences with Homework Starts with Home. So yes, you could be participating as well. That would be wonderful.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Jordan, go ahead. You're unmuted if you have a question.
Hi, this is Jordan. So one question I had is, because actually Red Lake is a grantee with the Housing Trust Fund grant. We are administering that grant currently through our LCH SSF. But We are actually a sub-grantee with FHPAP with the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative, but we are going to be a grantee through the Red Lake Nation in the FHPAP grant. And one thing that I do know is, you know, you have to have an advisory committee, you know, to administer the FHPAP grant. And is that something that is going to be similar with this FHPAP funding?
Jordan, thank you so much for your question. I'm going to have Diane and Nancy answer that, but it seems that they're having a technical difficulty. So could you hold for just one moment while they get back into the webinar? And just so you all know, I'm so sorry about the the pause here. Nancy and Diane will be right back. Thank you so much for your patience. Okay, Jordan, as we wait for Diane to come back on to speak to that question, is there anyone else that has a question that I could answer while we're waiting for her to join us again? All right, well, you've all been incredibly patient with our technical difficulties. My apologies that that final question was not answered, but what we can do is send that answer out to the group so that you have the response to that. Any other questions that you have regarding due diligence specifically, as Diane mentioned, you can direct to me.
Hi, Meredith. I think it's muted now.
Oh, good. Diane, you're back.
Oh.
Thank you.
That was very
yeah, sorry about that scramble to everybody. Did you hear Jordan's original question, Diane?
No, I was trying to call back in.
Okay, Jordan, would you mind repeating your question? It was regarding the advisory committee for FHPAP.
Yes, that's correct there, because like I was saying, you know, to reiterate, the Red Lake Homeless Shelter has, you know, a housing trust fund, you know, grant, and we are the grantee. But in regards to FHPAP, we are a sub-grantee with the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative. And part of, administering that FHPAP grant, we have to report to an advisory committee. Now, is that something that is going to, be similar with this FHPAP funding? Because, we applied and, we got approval to administer the FHPAP funding on behalf of the Red Lake Tribal Nation. So that's what I'm wondering, if I have to, report to a different advisory committee for this funding and how I would develop it.
Hi, Jordan. That's a great question. And no, you do not have to utilize the typical FHPAP advisory committee. The statute for Homework Starts with Home falls under one of the subdivisions at the later part of the statute, and the requirement for the advisory committee is omitted for any type of school-based program. So I think the idea is that your collaborative partnership will be where you see that community kind of come into play, and then also whatever you're doing to support people with lived experience to be part of the process. So no reason for creating another advisory committee. And certainly with the existing advisory committee that you have with the Minnesota Tribal Collaborative, you can always report about the activities of Homework Starts with Home just for their interest, but there's no requirement to have an advisory committee.
Okay. Just to add to that is because, I know I'm actually part of BICAP's advisory committee, and I know they are actually a current grantee of the Homework Starts with Home grant. So that's why I was just wondering if they already had a advisory committee. And since, we're both going to be grantees, if, we could just communicate with each other and kind of, I can learn from the successes and challenges that they've already encountered in order to implement and administrate this grant.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Well, they obviously, they might bring it up at their current FHPAP advisory committee, but they would have their own collaborative partnership already. And that would be a great opportunity to connect and see if they're meeting regularly with their Homework Starts with Home partners, which I assume they are. And that would be Evergreen and BICAP for the most part, and then maybe the school districts, which would also overlap with yours. And so that could be a great way to sort of have those regular meetings and coordinate with each other. Good idea.
I think, Dara, you had your hand up at one point. Do you have a question?
No, I knew the answer on the advisory committee meeting, and I was just going to put my 2 cents in there,
great.
but Diane, the expert, came back with it. So
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's what helps with all that expertise that I talked about earlier. We can cover each other just in case we get muted. All right. Any other questions about the learning cohort or the due diligence process?
Hi, this is Jordan again. I'm just wondering if I can add to a question I have with the due diligence.
Absolutely.
Okay. A question I have is because I'm going to be a grantee and then a sub-grantee on behalf of the tribe. Obviously, I'm going to need 2 different MOUs and 2 different resolutions. Obviously, I will need a tribal resolution, which is a little harder to obtain and coordinate to do. But obviously, as the grantee one, because I would be working with the Red Lake Housing Authority as well. So obviously, I've already done a MOU with them. But that's what I'm wondering. In order to get this due diligence signed, it's going to be a very narrow window of when the next tribal council meeting is going to be, and it's going to be days after when the due diligence is going to need to be in.
Sure. So will the meeting happen before August 1st, do you think?
Yes. Well, I mean, the meeting should happen before, the actual June 17th deadline. But, grant contracts and everything have to, go through our our tribal legal department and, be reviewed and approved before our actual tribal chairman will sign. So I just want to, let all of you know ahead of time that, that's going to be very close to, the deadline.
Okay, sure. That sounds good. And you can let us know if there's any delays of any kind. So the contract that we would do with the tribal nation for FHPAP would be one contract, and then the HTF would be the one that we do with you. So you'd really just be looking at the FPAP contract that might have a delay as a result of the board. And then the sub-agreement that they do with you does not have to be complete prior to us executing. We can execute based on the tribal council signing the agreement for FHPAP with Minnesota Housing, and then you can move forward from there with your own process. So we don't require any copies of the sub-grantee agreement ahead of time. And then the other, you don't, obviously the tribal nation is exempt from needing a resolution for the service area component, but obviously you'd have to have your tribal council do the approval. So that makes sense that you'd have maybe a resolution for the approval of the contract, but you wouldn't need it to operate. So I just want to make sure that part's clear.
Okay.
And then the MOU that you create, the MOU and your budget and the work plan, those can be used for both agreements. So you don't need to make a separate MOU for Housing Trust Fund versus FHPAP. You can have the same MOU in place for both of those agreements.
Okay, that makes sense. That'll make things a lot easier.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jordan. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Dara. I have a question about the MOU. We submitted our draft MOU and would like to have all of our 45 partners sign on to that. It's my understanding from the due diligence that the required signatures are for the folks that are actually receiving funding. Just because I'm a little bit nervous about being able to get a hold of all 14 of our school districts, since school is over in all 14 of them at this point. And I'm wondering if I can do two versions, an MOU that goes in at the beginning that's signed by the funding partners, and then a follow-up later for our internal purposes with all 45.
That makes sense. Yes, I think that's possible. We'll go back and talk to Kim, our contract manager, and just explain that because school is out, it'll be challenging to get those signatures prior to the start date, but you could start with the signers, and then maybe as long as they're separate pages, there could be additions where the MOU could be amended. So we'll check with our contract manager on the logistics of how to get that done, and then we'll make sure to send information about that particular question out to everyone, because I think that's going to be a common situation, especially since we're into summer already.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Other questions? Okay, any opposition to conducting the learning cohort community? All right, I think what we'll do then is talk with our existing Homework Starts with Home pilot participants and figure out if they would be okay with conducting that learning cohort together, and then move from there to set some potential dates. We'll work with our new staff person who is coming on board June 17th. So we'll make sure to have her introduce herself to everyone who is a Homework Starts with Home grantee, and that way you'll get to know her, and then we can set up something to see how it works. And we can always, the best part is if we find it's working well and we want to continue doing it, we can keep on meeting and keep learning from each other. And if we find that it's not useful and we'd like to set up, we can always do that as well. All right. Any other questions before we end our session today? And Meredith, you don't see any comments, just to make sure I'm not missing those.
Nope, no other chats and no other hands raised with questions.
Okay, perfect. Well, you're more than welcome to contact us. As mentioned, any of the due diligence and contracting questions can go to Meredith. You have the email as well, so you can certainly communicate through that. Even if you don't have an attachment, you're welcome to send an email through the MHFA grants email. And then I'm sure you all have Nancy and I's contact information as well, but just let us know if for some reason you need that. Obviously, planning grants and program grants, being part of this process, are two totally different types of grants, and so you may have specific questions that you just want to bring up individually, and that's completely fine. I think one of the things that you'll find with both Nancy and I is that we are really open to questions. We're very transparent. We like to have the communication back and forth because I think it really helps us learn as well. And so we're always open to those questions and considerations for flexibility in programming, trying to figure out how to make things work. We're really solution oriented more than we are trying to set a hard line. And so just want to make sure that you feel like you can contact us with any questions and concerns that you have. And congratulations, everyone. This has been really an amazing process. I wish you could have been a part of the review process that we had, because we had so many incredible reviewers. We had community reviewers as part of our process to review these grants, and we just had a wonderful meeting very early on in the pandemic, and it was incredible to see the participation considering everything that was going on. I know that over this past more than a week now, things have become even more challenging for many of you due to the death of George Floyd and the pandemic happening at the same time. And I just want to say that sometimes doing business as usual can be very healing. It's absolutely essential that these funds go out to this program, because we have so many households that are at imminent risk of homelessness due to the COVID situation. And so I'm just very, very appreciative, deeply appreciative of everything that you are doing to help prevent and address homelessness in our state. So thank you so much. Thank you for your interest, especially those of you who applied for and received funds for planning grants. Really looking forward to working together with you during this next couple of years. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.